Hello, I am about to start laying my Chevron engineered wood flooring. I looked online for some videos and I didn't find very many, so I thought that I would put one together and hopefully help anybody else out that is looking to do the same floor. So the first thing to consider with this flooring is that you have a really flat, good level substrate. So in here I have normal flooring boards underneath this ply, and they were in pretty good condition, so I just made sure that I screwed them firmly down, no squeaks or anything like that, and removed any old staples and things from where it previously had carpets. And because it was so good, I was able to use quite a thin ply, so this is just 6mm ply. And I bought the biggest boards, so less joins. You've got to try and consider that the joins don't fall on a join of your floorboards, just to give them the most rigidity. And then I screwed down every sort of 10 inches, 12 inches. I used long screws where the flooring joists are, so I marked them on the wall so I knew, and then just smaller screws to nip into the floorboards everywhere else. So yeah, got all that. Great, feels great, doesn't squeak, and then it's just about getting that nice and clean, ready to start marking up for your measurements of where you're going to start.
Now somebody's going to say, why are you laying your floor before plastering? But that's because I want to do recessed skirting boards, so the floor ideally needs to be laid first. So I will protect it once it's laid. So this is my room. It's not square like most people's. So I have to decide where I want my central line to be and how I want the pattern to fall. So for me, I've got this bay area here, and I want to have my chevron pattern down the centre of this bay, so coming up to the centre of the bay there, with the last point of my floor just landing right there.
So I marked the centre of my bay. Actually, I already had that mark, thinking when I was doing something with the plasterboard. So I have the centre line. Now I want to get that centre line onto the floor. So the difficulty is how you're creating a straight line down your room, but you've got to remember that it's straight in relation to your walls and your living room. So if your walls kick out at an angle and you've got a line that you consider straight down the middle, it would look hard. You want to almost go with your room. So the first thing I have done is I put something that is straight against this plasterboard, which is pretty good. So always a benefit of doing things as straight and level as possible in the first place helps you out in the long run. So I marked my centre line on the wood, and then I used a big square as possible to just put that down there, out the way, and use the wood, and I can mark up a straight line, and you can do both sides. If there's a slight variance, it's pretty good in here, I have to say. Let me show you. So I marked both ways, and my line's down the middle there. So that's my starting point then. I've used that square, and I've marked that middle point, and then you want to take that down the living room. So this is where it's a challenge, because you could just go off this line, but you've got to make sure that you're staying sensibly within parallel to your walls as well. So what I did is I used a laser level, popped that laser level on there, which beamed straight. I kept it on this line here, so I've only got this much line from my square. So I got my laser nice and straight down there, and it beamed all the way down the room. And then what I did is I checked the measurements to my wall all the way down that line to see if I was going with my wall. Does it look sensible? You know, looking down there and going, does that look nice and straight down my room, or does it look odd in my room? So I'll show you.
So I popped the laser level on, and that gave me a straight line, although you can't much see it in this light, so I had to turn the light off to fully see that all the way down. And then what I did is I measured to this wall at a variety of points down this line and measured to this wall here. And just really to see whether I'm staying quite parallel to the wall or whether I'm deviating. I also just stood back and took a look. Does it look okay? And then I did another double check. So in to this alcove here, and the bottom one there, which was just a couple of mil difference, great, and off the fireplace, just meeting both ends and seeing if I'm staying pretty straight. And as it happens, I was pretty central to the room in every which way, which is great. So then I just drew a nice dark line down here, so that's my centre line sorted. So once you have your centre line, you can make up just a small amount of boards, and then you can mark out your sidelines here. So you can check the measurement on your ruler. You want to be the same measurement from midline to outer line on either side, so you know you're definitely nice and central and everything's together properly. And then you can take that measurement and you can mark off the central line all the way down, and then you can draw your two outer lines just so that you know as you're going along, staying centred there, my end shouldn't be over that line, so I'm not deviating off my central line going all wonky. I know that I want my last chevron tip as such to be just into this bay, and that's important. That's what I want in terms of the pattern, so I would want it to finish. So taking into consideration any skirting board, work out where you would like this last point to finish, if that's what's important to you. And then what I did is I measured the boards, so there's 5 there, so then I went down the room, instead of doing them one board at a time, I measured 5, and then I'd go down and measure to the point of the next 5, draw a line, and the next 5, and the next 5, until I got down to the end of the room, and then I had to work individual boards. So we're talking this measurement. So when I got down, I could work out where my first board needed to start for me to end up on that point being just where I need it to be. Because I am going to start down this side, and the reason why I'll do that, if I started that end where I want to finish all nicely on a point and work my way down, I would get to this position and then I wouldn't be able to slide these boards in, so it doesn't make sense. So the best thing for me to do is start this end, so I can create this little triangle, get the boards going, run them all the way up, and then at that end there, when I get to there, I can slide boards in this way, and that won't be a problem for me. So I need to start there, but it's important that I finish at the right point now, which is why I've calculated exactly where to start to get where I need to get down there. So next thing I need to do is work out where to cut the boards. So you can see I've already done all of this, but I just took the time to think it over before I recorded it. So this is where I want to start my first point in there. So I need to cut the board so that it sits in there. So to do that, I've got 35 mil, take away 10 mil for an expansion gap, so I'll pull that off, and I've got 25 mil. So I know that I need to 25 mil of board past the point. So there it is, so 25 mil board past the point. So that's where I'll cut my first board. And then you can just slot the next boards in, this one and this one, and you can run the line, keep slotting the boards in and run the line until your next board doesn't touch the line, and you know that'll be your first full board that doesn't need cutting. So I can see that these 3 need cutting, and yes, I've got this tiny little triangle, so I'll stick 2 boards in there, draw a line and cut them. I'm not too worried about the fact that I'm cutting tiny bits off these boards. 1, because that was going to be hidden, so it will work out perfect, and 2, because the remainder of the boards I can use up the other end. So that's all ready for cutting.
So before you actually start laying any boards, something to consider is the sort of pattern and colour of the boards. So my boards, so that one, a bit knotty. I've got some that are very plain, and then let's see if I can find. So you can see, I think you'll be able to see that one is lighter than that one. So we've got sort of different colours. I would say that I've got a few that are quite light, a few that are very dark, and the most of them that in between, so the kind of grey, oaky colour, which I love. For me, I want it to be quite random, so I don't want to try and match so that two pieces meet together like a perfect match, because they'll never will be. So I want to keep it really random, so I don't have all the grey ones together, all the dark grey ones together, all the light ones together. I want to spread it all out. I don't want all the knotted ones together. So it's worth thinking about what you want and then sorting them into piles, because you might come across a box that's full of quite dark ones, and you might come across a box that's full of quite light ones or quite knotty ones, and if you just take them out of the box and lay, you might end up finding you've got patches around your room of grey or knotty ones. So for me, I'm just putting them into piles of light, dark, medium and knotty, and look out for any defects of any ones that you think would be more you don't like. They'll be suitable for cutting bits off like around the edges. So depends how important it is to you, but it's important to me. So I'm doing that. I've got to finish doing that now, and then I can get on starting with the laying. So I am gluing down. So some people float the floors, some people use cork underlay, foam underlay, some people nail them down, all different methods. I don't think there's necessarily a right or a wrong, but this works for me. I'm going to glue on the ply and then stick them down, leaving my expansion gap of 10mm around the edges, and yeah, I think it'll be good. So in terms of cutting the boards, I've got a miter saw, chop saw that I'm going to use. You could use a hand saw, there's a variety of things you could use, but for me, in terms of speed, miter saw, I've got that set up in the hallway. Don't set it up in the room because it will be dusty. You want to keep this nice and clear of dust, and just note, I'm just looking around now at the screws, make sure all your screws are countersunk into the ply when you screw them down. You don't want anything that's going to protrude under this, because your glue is going to be quite thin. Okay, so put my hair back, safety first, cutting and all that. So I have cut my triangle, and then you need to just prime. I'm just primed the floor area that where I'm sticking this kind of first few boards down. I didn't bother priming the lot yet because I didn't really want to walk around on a tacky floor, so I just primed this bit. I'm going to get this stuck down, and then I can let that go off while I get on with sorting all my boards out. So let me show you what I'm doing. This bit is, I think, the most important bit, because you want to start on the right foot.
The most genuine, kindest person I think I've ever met, and yeah, she deserves.
So there we go, all cut, ready to go in, and then I've just spent a bit of time lining all that up and getting it in nicely. So then I'm going to put it here. I've got this piece of wood, which I know is actually 10.5mm. I can live with the extra 5mm above what I was going to do. So I've got this, and I'm just going to slide that in behind that, up against the wall. It's not that I think the wall is perfect, but it gives me a good starting point to then put my wood in place. It's a matter of sliding that, getting that lined up, which is clearly not at the moment. So I'll get that lined up. I've put the laser, so I want the laser on the line, because it's actually quite difficult to line this up because of this extra wood, and then on here this extra wood, because what you're trying to line up to the line is the top layer of wood there. So I've done my sort of trial fit, looks good, I'm on the line, and what I'm just checking is that I'm not deviating by pushing up against that wood that I put in there. That works out well. So now I just want to glue, and all I really want to do right now is glue that bit down, let that go off, and then I've got my starting point and I'm away.
So when I started, I just did the little triangle area here, just a small area. This glue goes off quite quickly. It seems to be good glue, but it's pretty sticky, messy, so try and stay within your lines, and maybe when you start, just get used to it with a small amount at a time. It's also worth letting the boards, they say acclimate, sounds very posh to me, but just acclimatise to the room a week or two before you actually lay them, and if any boards look bent, then perhaps don't use them. And also, as you're going along, every now and again you'll come across a board that's a little bit short or a little bit long. I would just take that out and replace it if need be. You can see I'm using a hammer and a block of wood at this point. It works well, it doesn't damage the board, but it's not what I would recommend. I'd say use a small rubber or plastic hammer, which I find at this point I couldn't find it, and then I did, and that made my life a little easier. So I'm on to the measuring now. So I'll measure the length of the last board that's in, then you put it onto a board you're willing to cut. Check the angle. I could have used a square, it's a right angle to mark it, and then pop it in. So you just do that for all the cut boards along the edge there. You see I've got a rubber hammer now. And this time you can see I used a square on this little piece here because I figure that I don't need to use the angle finder. The angle finder is more useful when it's not a right angle. You'll see me make some different cuts later. And there you go, first row's down, and then on to doing the next row. So again, I primed the floor, made a little bit mistake here. You can see I started putting 2 rows in. You need to do 1 row at a time because you need to start alternating ends, otherwise you have the problem I mentioned earlier where you can't slot the last boards in. But same process here. When it's tough, I still use the block and the hammer because I can bash it a little bit harder without damaging anything, but most of the time I can either just push these boards in or I can use a plastic or rubber hammer. So they're the boards there that I have to take out because I realised I'm doing it wrong, but that's a part of learning. This is the first time I've done this myself, and I learned a lot along the way. When you move on to the next row and you need to cut against a straight wall, you just use a square. That makes it really easy. You mark to the tip of the last board that's down, take that measurement minus your expansion gap, and then you can use a square. On the good end that you're going to keep, rest the square and then find the measurement along the other edge of the square. So I'll have to adjust this so you find it so that the measurement is just at the end of the board, and then you mark it there and go off and cut it. So against a straight wall you can just do that. In reality, when you try it, you'll see exactly what I mean. So I do that for that board, and then I do it again for the next board. And here's how I manage when it's not a straight wall. So I put an old scrap piece of board in, I measure along the length of the last board in, that's the first measurement I need, and then from the point of the next board, using that board as a reference, I make a measurement there. Take my board that I'm going to put in, I'm going to cut and put in there, so the long piece there, and then I take those 2 measurements that I just took, the shorter one and the longer one, and I measure the first one there and just mark that off on the board. There we go. And then that second one there. Draw a line between the 2, and that's where I need to cut. So that's what I do. Go off and cut that, or I've already cut it actually, and pop that in. So I just do that along the wall there because I found that was the easiest thing to do. Just making sure you take into consideration your expansion gap. So time to put those boards down because they were just in for reference while I was cutting them. Now I'm getting used to the glue. I can put a large amount down, just tip it out there, and use a larger implement just to spread that all around and then trowel it as usual. Each time I did this, I marked out where the row would go so that I could just glue along there, because once this stuff starts going off, it's actually quite difficult to get off. So that is something worth noting. If you're going over the edge there, then just get that off really quickly. So it's getting easy now. Just same process, 1 row all the way down. This bit is really enjoyable, apart from sometimes they don't fit like that one, so I just changed it out. Sometimes it's slightly tight or slightly long or slightly short. So just keep an eye out for that. You can fill in any tiny little gaps you have, but in reality these boards were really good and I didn't need to do any filling once I was finished, so that I was pretty happy with that. Once I stood up, you just couldn't see any of the tiny little gaps that I thought might be a bit of a problem. So on to the last bit, so a little bit more cutting again, just the opposite way to what I started with. So last full board in, and then it's making some cuts. Shouldn't have stood on that board then really while it's still wet. So here we go. So measuring the gap that's left, probably about 30 centimetres from memory, and then just marking that onto a board that I'm going to use, and again using my square just to mark where I need to cut it. And then you can just put in your other boards because there's going to be more than one cut here clearly, so I can just keep bringing that line along the board. Sorry that it's not very clear. I definitely think I need to improve my camera techniques. So you can see I went off and got my bigger square so that I can keep running that line until I'm no longer on the boards. So using some scrap piece of boards there. I always kept the right and left scraps in a little pile so I could just pick them up when need be. So what you see there is that my line then runs to the point where I don't need to put any additional boards in. That's all I need. So I can go off and cut those now and slot them all in. I just mark that those are scrap there because they've been cut on both ends now, so no good really for anything. So just measuring up there, making sure I'm cutting on the right side of the line, taking into consideration the blade thickness, and I just cut away. Using a miter saw made my life really easy. I'm just checking they all look good. Nice straight line. There we go. And I don't put them in as one, but with the little pieces I often put an extra little bit of glue on them, just because they can move around a little bit more. So I put a little extra glue on the bottom there, because my ends are just tiny little cuts. And there you go. Once you have done the body of your room and you're at the edges and you're close to finishing, there's just a few things to think about around the edges, or a few things that might make your life a little bit easier. So I have got this chimney here and two recess, and on the other side it's just a straight run. So when you get to an area like this, or whether it's a straight run and you've got to cut all of the boards, then this is how I would recommend doing it. So you look at, let's turn that around. So here, there's 10 boards along this little run here. There's more like 30 down the other side that have to be cut. So the first thing I do is check if I'm consistent in the gap. You don't need to be super consistent because you've got a few mil there to play with. So if you're a few mil up or down, then you can just make your expansion gap slightly bigger in places. So I am quite consistently 235 mil, so take off 10 mil for expansion gap. I can cut my boards to 225 mil in. So there's a couple of ways that you can do it. For a short run like this, you could put your 10 boards together. Did have them together. So I chose my run of boards that I liked the look of, and you could simply go in and mark up 225 in my case, and I could go all the way up marking 225, and then I can just draw a straight line all the way up, and then I know that's where I need to cut each individual board. So that works perfectly for just a short run where you might have sort of up to 10 boards. But when you have, like the other side, lots of boards, I think the better thing to do is measure up one board and then set up a kind of little jig or whatever you might call it on your miter saw, so that you can just pop them in. You don't need to measure and mark every board. You've created almost a sort of created like a template there on your miter saw, so that each board just slide in and chop. I'll show you. I'm not explaining it very well, but for a long run that works out much better than putting all your boards together and trying to mark them, or individually marking every board. What you want to do, if you've got a consistent cut, is mark one board and then just be able to chop them off the basis of the measurements for the first board. So I'll show you, because I don't think I'm doing a great job of explaining it. So to get an individual board measurement, so that you can use one board as a template for all the other boards on your miter saw, if that's the way you're cutting it, or you could do a similar thing with a handsaw, jigsaw. You will need to put a couple of boards together so that you can mark out that measurement, in my case 225, just up there, and then you can just pop a square along there, and you can draw the line up. And then as a double check, if you just put a scrap piece of board in the floor there, so you've got your two angles, you've got your starting point, and then you want to be 10mm off the wall, you can just check that works also. But before going off and cutting them all, just take one of the boards and go and cut that, and then just try it all the way along your run, just to make sure that you're not doing anything crazy. You don't want to go ahead and cut them all and realise that they're wrong. So I've cut one, there it is, and if you find that fits nicely all the way along, and once it's in, don't forget to check, nice expansion gap. You can slot a piece of 10mm wood down there, packer, if you need to, just to check. But I've checked all along, and that is a good size. So now I'll show you how to bulk cut as such. So here is my miter saw. Here is the piece of wood that I just cut, that I know is good, and therefore I can set up a little clamp here, so that I can just slot each piece of wood in and cut it, and I don't need to mark all of them. When you're doing 20 or 30 down one wall, you don't really want to do that. So you can use either your cut board or just a board that you've marked up. Perfect. So take into consideration the depth of your blade. It's 2.4mm in my case, so I want to make sure that I cut on the line onto the scrap piece, which is this piece, and that I keep this exactly to the length of the line. If I cut on the line or over the line, then I'm going to have a shorter board than I anticipate. So once you are happy with your position, which I am, let me show you. So now you're in your happy position, and you just want to create a clamp to keep it in place. Actually turn this board around, because I realised that I had a lip on this end, which meant it was hard to clamp in. So just rechecking that runs nicely on this side, if that's it. And now I can clamp something on the end there to keep this position consistent for every board, as the boards should be pretty much exactly the same size. So I'm just clamping this little bit tight and then sticking this on here. It's always difficult. There we go. Check that when you're pushed right up against that your line is good. Looks good to me. Appropriate PPE, eyes, ears, and then just cut. You can just check that this one matches the other one perfectly. It does. There we go. And then you can just, after that point, slot the next one in and cut. and then the next one, and the next one, and away you go. Cutting around door frames is actually not too difficult at all. So the important thing when going around this door frame is you need to get your boards in. Now, we've discussed previously about measuring to the wall, sticking your boards together, drawing a line down of where you need to cut the boards when they come up to the end of the wall. So same principle, I measure from here to here, marked it along the boards that were all put together, including this one here, and then I just stopped, so cut at the same angle as this one. I just stopped 10mm after the end of the wall for my expansion gap. So you know that you cut the board, you know this one's got to be cut at a funny angle, so you just go as far as you need to the wall under there plus 10mm. So when they were all together, I just stopped here at that measurement. I think it was about 4 centimetres. And then the wall is a right angle, so I just used a square. So I got the one angle, so I took that angle, popped the square on and cut it to the end, and that then slots in. It's really important to have the boards in place when you're measuring up, because you need something to measure off. If you just try and measure before anything's there, you'll struggle, but no problem at all. Next one, a little bit more challenging maybe. So I know the next board's going to meet this straight, and then it goes around the corner. So again, another right angle. So I measured from the end of this board to the end of the wall, plus 10mm for expansion gap. So when they were together, I could just follow this line off the measurement that I measured under there, and then again I popped my square on and just cut around the corner there. So the important thing is to have these all together when you're cutting, so that you can visualise them and check that they all fit as one piece. This is the last row, so quite exciting for me. At this point, I'm feeling quite confident. You might notice that I haven't troweled the glue here. I was just keeping it slightly thicker because there is a very, very tiny slant to the ply there, but nothing to worry about. Just keeping the glue nice and thick to mitigate that. And then I've got all my lovely little cut pieces that I can get in. And you see I'm using the pull bar a lot along here because it is the last row, it is tight, super useful tool for doing this. So I can hook it in and pull it, or just tap it with a hammer if need be. But it worked really well. I can't get my fingers underneath the plasterboard into that 10mm expansion gap. So it works really well using the pull bar, especially here at the end. There you go. And I'm done. I have to say, I was super chuffed with the end result. I think it looks absolutely amazing. There's no big gaps, no bumps or lumps or anything to be concerned about. Really happy, feels really sturdy once it's dry. So I hope that that's helpful to you guys.